Learning how to read the water is one of the most important aspects of fishing. The ocean is intimidating, especially from the beach. When you walk up, all one sees is blue and crashing waves in an endless ocean. Unless you're in the upper Texas coast in Texas, it just looks brown and nasty. To the untrained eye, all it sees is water and waves, but after this video you'll see endless structures and highways that the fish love. In this video, I'm going to show you how to read the beach to identify structure, cuts, troughs, and even holes. But before we continue, if you want to be elite all year round, you want to catch fish everywhere you go, please click on the subscribe button and hit that bell notification for some of the crispiest fishing videos out here. Before we get right into it, I want to talk about a factor that's going to affect the complexity and visibility of reading the beach. That is the wind. Wind directly influences wave activity on the beach. It influences how they break, how often, how choppy and frothy it gets. If the wind is too high, reading the beach becomes very hard. But once you learn how to read the waves, you will memorize your local beach and the structure, and you'll know exactly where you're going to cast at. Depending on where you're from, a wind coming from land going into the beach will flatten the waves. Depends on the knots also. This pushes the air towards the ocean and makes it flat. A wind coming directly from the ocean onto land will push the water onto the land. The stronger the wind, the harder the breakers get. A strong crosswind will make it very hard to anchor your bait, which means your bait will start rolling along the beach. In order to counteract that, you're going to have to cast into the wind a heavier weight. Next up, I'm going to give you a brief lesson on reading wave action since we were about to talk about the guts and the troughs. So how do waves form? When the water pushes onto a sandbar, the water starts to crest over the sandbar and creates a wave. The wave will break across the sandbar and completely stop once the sandbar stops and lowers into a cut. The way to identify a gut or a trough is by looking where the waves stop breaking and flatten in the water. A trough is typically in between two sandbars which create the breaking waves. You can typically tell how steep and deep the water is by how big the waves form after the water breaks on the sandbar, which create big waves. Now for the first structure. When you walk up to the beach, especially the Gulf Coast and in Texas, you will notice that there are breaking waves that start to fizzle out on the shore. As you walk into the ocean, you will notice that it gets slightly deeper, maybe up to your knees. It really depends how tall you are. This is what we call the wade gut. The wade gut is the first fish highway. I like to cast that here and cast my 7-foot rods with smaller baits or live finger mullet. I use the smaller baits such as artificial baits that mimic cut baits because I'm looking to catch trout, sand trout, whiting, croaker, and other bait fish to catch the bigger fish. The wade gut is a great place to catch table fare such as speckled trout in the summer as well as slot reds. I primarily use the wade gut as a bait spot though. Another thing about the wade gut is that depending on the tides and the wind, the wade gut will differentiate in depth. The way you identify the wade gut or any trough is by looking into the ocean and identifying the wave action. The next structure is the first sandbar. The first sandbar is the first set of breaking waves after the shore. Most people, including myself, use the first sandbar to cast from into the trough that's in between the first and the second bar. This is also the most accessible sandbar if the weather is rough. Disclaimer: do not attempt any bars if the weather is rough. Another disclaimer: the first sandbar in front of the stairs along the road by the houses at Surfside Beach is very deep. Last July, I was out there wading looking for some speckled trout. The weather was perfect. It was like blowing like 5 out of the southeast. The water was green, flat surf. So I'm walking in the beach. I'm going from ankle deep to knee deep. And then I continue walking. All of a sudden, I am in chest deep water. I'm like, wait, where is the sandbar? I continue going. The water is up to my neck. Another thing I like to do is stand on the bar and walk along it and cast soft plastics for speckled trout. On a good day, you walk and look for topwater blowups and cast into them. There is nothing like surf fishing for speckled trout on a hot morning when the winds are low and the water is green. After the first sandbar, you have the gut in between the second. This gut is my favorite to fish for bull reds, jacks from the beach. It's also a great place to fish for trout when the tide is low because the gut is much deeper than the wade gut on a low tide. This gut is also great for black tips in the 5-foot to 6-foot range. Those sharks are an outstanding fight on surf casting tackle. Wading from the first sandbar to the second bar gets sketchy though. On a good day in Texas, this gut is about 4 to 5 feet and even deeper the more south you go. I do not suggest attempting this if you are not a strong swimmer without PFD or in rough weather. As we transition from this gut, we have arrived into the second sandbar. The sandbar is particularly used to stand on to cast into the gut in between the third sandbar. The top of the second sandbar is the land of the massive rays. In the summer, a well-placed bait on top of the sandbar is almost guaranteed a large ray. I don't know how many times this happened to me before that I'm thinking that I'm getting a nice cast from the first past the second, and I'm like, all right, perfect. You know, when you're out in the water, there's perception change. It looks like you're casting further, but you're really not, or it looks like you're casting closer, but you really cast far. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. Well, for the longest time, I kept casting on top of the bar, and I was catching these massive rays with wingspans of 6 feet. And these things, if you catch one of these guys, you can skip the gym for the rest of the week. Forget about arm day. You're not going to be able to go work out your arms because those things are beasts. They suck themselves onto the sand, and good luck trying to pull them up. These guys get even harder the deeper the water gets. Try catching a huge ray from the pier. Forget about it. You're done. You're done for the week. But anyways, when accessible, this is the opening to casting large baits, 8 bait with a hole molded into the gut. This gut here can have some large fish. My 50-inch bull reds have come from the gut after the second bar. I've caught multiple tippers over 6 feet, big spinners, ton of mackerel, sandbar sharks. The second sandbar is only accessible in nice weather, and you must wear PFD. Now here comes the challenge. I'm no longer gonna say wading to the bars, because in order to get to the third sandbar, you're gonna need to swim there. This gut you have to swim across is at least 6 feet and can get deeper on high tide. If the wind is blowing over 10, forget it. Actually, just forget going to the third sandbar. You don't need to do all that. I have said, oh man, this is how I'm gonna go. This is how I'm gonna die 4 times while surf fishing. 3 out of those 4 times were me getting to the third sandbar being foolish. I was like 20, 21, 22, you know, forget about it. Young, now I have a lot to lose. But anyways, honestly, there's no point in you going to the third sandbar. You can catch the same caliber fish in between the second and third bar. The only reason you really need to get back there is if you're trying to shark. But you can probably kayak a bait if you can afford a kayak. And if you have a kayak, by all means, go way past that. Go 400 yards out, 300 yards out. If you have a drone, you can drop it back there. But really, there is really no point in trying to stand on the third sandbar, because if you're not at least 6 foot tall, you're gonna be underwater. And when I did it back in the day, I was swimming there, I was sinking down with the rod over the water and pushing myself up and casting. And literally, that's like a 30-yard cast, 20-yard cast. There's no point. Don't do it. Next up, we'll be talking about 2 different types of structure that hold even more fish. First up is the cut. A cut is a gap in the middle of a sandbar. Cuts are associated with the rip current that quickly suck out water into the Gulf/ocean. You know, the ones that drag you out? Well, they also drag out bait fish. Cuts are great places to cast into because the big predator fish are sitting behind that sandbar, waiting to ambush any disoriented fish that is too weak to swim out of the rip currents. I like to drive around the beach and look for cuts so I can cast right behind them. Whether bait or lures, either way you're still going to catch something if you catch near a cut. It also depends on tides. If the tide is going out, I really like to cast right behind the sandbar. Not exactly behind the cut, but a few yards behind the cut. If the tide is coming in, I will cast in the middle of the cut itself. Now, the next type of structure, in my opinion, is the hardest to identify, and that is the hole. The hole is hard to identify because there's only 2 ways you know there's one, because the breakers in between those, you see flat, calm water. That's the hole.
Check it out. Look, here's the hole right there. You see right there in the middle, there's a breaking wave, and then there's no waves right there whatsoever. Right there, no waves. And then you get a breaking wave right there. There's right there breaking waves, no breaking waves. There's a hole or a really deep trough right in that area.
This is different from a cut. The hole is much wider than a cut, the gap. The other way to find out is, well, to fall in one. There's also holes in the guts, but those are really hard to find. It basically looks like a slick of oil on the surface that's circular. When you do find a hole, cast directly in it. Whiting and other fish congregate in those areas, and big fish will come into these holes and ambush them. Well, That's it. This summarizes my How to Read the Beach in 2024 video. I hope you pick up a thing or two, and I guarantee you, adding this information to your fishing toolbox is guaranteed to land you your next PB. You take this information, you go all over the world, no matter where you're at, you can read the beach now. Alright, well that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Catch you next time.